Hello, I'm Travis Von Graffert, and today I'm going to be talking about some polls that I took on what people infer happened before the Big Bang. Now, it's very interesting because there was one option in particular that superseded the rest of them. Now, these polls were taken in the r/theoretical physics subreddit and the r/cosmology subreddit. With the r/theoretical physics subreddit, at the time of this video, there were 197 votes. With the r/cosmology subreddit, there were 543 votes. So let's get into it. In both of these subreddits, the first part's pretty much the same. The question is, what do you infer happened before the Big Bang? Now, I am going into experimental and observational cosmology. So I try to make this as empirical as I can with apparatuses, like telescopes and things of that sort. But to be more nuanced, this is what I asked. Which one of these pre-Big Bang models could be proven within a confidence interval of 5 sigma with interferometers such as the LISA, the future LISA space probe, which is the laser interferometer space antenna, Cryogenics and Bolometers, which were on the Planck Space Telescope, Polarimeters, particle accelerators, because, the quark era of the early universe, our data from that is based off of the Large Hadron Collider, charge-coupled devices, supercomputers, Monte Carlo algorithms, neural networks, and artificial intelligence. So we're trying to render the following hypothesis true, false, or indeterminate with interferometers, cryogenics, bolometers, polarimeters, particle accelerators, charge-coupled devices, supercomputers, Monte Carlo algorithms, neural networks, and artificial intelligence. So we're talking about specifically right now the theoretical physics subreddit. So number one option is a quantum tunneled and quantum fluctuation generated Big Bang occurring. And these quantum fluctuations went from one false vacuum state to another vacuum state due to bubble nucleation, thereby causing the Big Bang. And this has been proposed by Alan Guth, Alexander Vilenkin, and Andrei Linde. Just to kind of divert here, here's a book on cosmology from Oxford University. And in that book, they kind of get into some of these things. The second option, so that was number one, quantum tunneling and quantum fluctuation preceded the Big Bang. Number two, string gas cosmology, in which an unstable hot gas of strings and generic string vacua in a quasi-static universe preceded the Big Bang due to nonsingular and ekpyrotic scenarios. This has been proposed by Robert Brandenberger and Gabriele Veneziano. I'm sorry if I butchered that name, but that's been proposed by them. A book that I have dealing with string theory, because that's basically string theory, is this book from Brian Greene, The Fabric of the Cosmos. It's kind of torn up, but it's a really interesting book. The next, so that's number two, string theory, basically. Number three, the Hartle-Hawking-Hertog no-boundary proposal, in which the causality in pre-Big Bang universes and the arrow of time points in one direction throughout the space-time continuum and is in a de-Sitter state near a saddle point of the potential. The Hartle-Hawking wave function produced a collapse of a high number of freedom degrees of quanta through a kind of bubble nucleation. So for this, I have, Stephen Hawking's book here that kind of talks more about that in some ways. That was number 3. So number 3, the Hartle-Hawking-Hertog no-boundary proposal. Number 4, Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, in which there was a lambda-driven exponential expansion of a pre-Big Bang universe, a universe that preceded ours, and lambda represents the cosmological constant and dark energy in Einstein's field equation. In post, I may put Einstein field equation somewhere on this video. The book that I have for that is this book right here from Roger Penrose, The Road to Reality. But let's move on to number 5. I can't pronounce this guy's name. Abhay Ashkatar. I think that's how. I'm sorry if I butchered it. But I'm trying to give credit to these people because it's not all about me, you know. His loop quantum gravity, in which there were spin foams producing a pre-Big Bang branch to our current universe with black hole remnants or white hole remnants. So that's number 5, loop quantum gravity. Number 6. Now, I put this in this subreddit to kind of as a control to see, you know, if this would offset another thing that was more dominant that I'm going to get into more soon here. But number 6 is a physical pre-Big Bang entity caused the Big Bang by producing a small bubble of a false vacuum by calculating the tunneling amplitude using both a canonical and functional integral approach. The functional integral approach could have led to a Euclidean interpolating solution that produced a pseudo-manifold. Now with this one, I put an excerpt, obviously, because this is getting into the notion of creationism. So I said, you know, please analyze this particular hypothesis with caution, experiments, measurements, systematic observation, and inferences, rather than your personal reward, pleasure, pain, punishment, and transcendence. I'll get into what I think about this hypothesis later, but there are cited sources for option number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's kind of get into what people chose. So I'm going to put up a graphic here as to the percentage between these options. So with the r/theoretical physics subreddit, there were 197 votes. 32 went to the notion that quantum fluctuations, quantum tunneling in a certain vacuum state preceded the Big Bang and caused the Big Bang. So there were 32 for option number 1, 32 votes. For option number 2, with string theory or string gas cosmology, there were just 3 votes. 3 votes. For number 3, the Hartle-Hawking-Hertog wave function, or the Hartle-Hawking-Hertog no boundary proposal, there were 23 votes. So the next one, which is option number 4, Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, a whopping 103 votes. Option number 5, loop quantum gravity, spin foams causing the Big Bang, 9 votes. And surprisingly, only 27 votes for a pre-Big Bang entity causing the Big Bang by producing a small bubble of a false vacuum. So, with option number 1 had 16.2% of the votes, which is the quantum tunneling, quantum fluctuations, and vacuum state. Option number 2 had, wow, it's very minuscule here. I don't even think the percentage showed up, but it had just 3 votes, so it's very minuscule. Option number 2, string theory, had the lowest. Option number 3 had 11.7% of the votes. And that's dealing with the no boundary proposal. Option number 4 had 52.3% of the votes. Roger Penrose here. Let me get this book out right here. Roger Penrose. Now, I'm going to talk more about this because for some reason, Roger Penrose, people gravitate more, no pun intended, gravitate more towards conformal cyclic cosmology. And I am going to kind of get into that a little more. This is why I made the video. 52% in this particular subreddit went to conformal cyclic cosmology from Roger Penrose. That's option number 4. Option number 5, loop quantum gravity only had 9 votes. So option number 5 had 4.6% in this particular the r/theoretical physics subreddit. Option number 6 actually had the second, no, not the second highest, the third highest. The third after the first one about quantum fluctuations, vacuum state, and quantum tunneling. But number 6, option number 6, with a pre-Big Bang entity, it had 27 votes. It had 13.7% of the votes. So I'm going to get into what I think about this soon. But let's move on to the r/cosmology subreddit, because there were way more votes. There are 543 votes here. So we got a larger sample size here. Now, with this one, there are only 5 options. I omitted the pre-Big Bang entity for 2 reasons. One, this subreddit frowns upon anything that they think is peddling metaphysics and religion, and understandably so. And 2, you know, I wanted one to be kind of a control. So there is nothing about, there are only 5 options in this one. So let's get into this one. So the first 5 are pretty much the same here. So it's 543 votes, got a larger sample size. So option number 1, same as the other one, quantum fluctuations, quantum tunneling, and a certain vacuum state, or metastable vacuum state, causing the Big Bang, has 144 votes. String theory, well, string gas cosmology, has 20 votes. The no boundary proposal has 44 votes. And once again, you got to bring this book back out. Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, it had a whopping 292 votes. If he was the president, he would have won. Loop quantum gravity, which is the last one, had 43 votes. So let's go through these options one more time based on percentage. So option number 1 had 26.5% of the votes. That is the quantum fluctuations, quantum tunneling, vacuum state hypothesis. Option number 2, string theory, had only 3.7% of the votes. And option number 3, the no boundary proposal, it had 8.1% of the votes in the r/cosmology subreddit. And then once again, Mr. Penrose with conformal cyclic cosmology had a whopping 53.8% of the votes in this subreddit, the r/cosmology subreddit. And lastly, loop quantum gravity's spin foams causing the Big Bang had 7.9% of the votes. So let's kind of get into what I think about this, or what I infer about this. Now, let's get into conformal cyclic cosmology. This is what has won here. This is what a lot of people infer happened before the Big Bang. What are some of the reasons I think Roger Penrose won? Now, I think one reason is he's really been out there talking about this. I think that a lot of the other people, ranging from, now, not to say that Andrei Linde and let's see, Vilenkin and Robert Brandenberger and Hawking and Hertog and Hartle and Mr. Abe Ashkatar, sorry if I butchered his name, and Alan Guth, who actually is the person I got the whole pre-Big Bang entity thing from, because it's a paper he wrote on, can we make a universe in a laboratory? So that's where that comes from. I didn't just make a dubious hypothesis based on personal pain, pleasure, reward, and punishment. It's a legitimate, somewhat legitimate hypothesis dealing with pre-Big Bang extraterrestrials, even though it sounds really out there and far-fetched. But a lot of these other physicists haven't, you know, they've been out there, they have, but it's Roger Penrose, I think this is something similar to Bohr, Niels Bohr. And yes, I have a book dealing with quantum mechanics here. And Niels Bohr, his personality made it where people gravitated more towards the Copenhagen interpretation. As a matter of fact, this poll, these two polls might need to go into a paper. I may need to write a paper about this because there's another paper dealing with many different interpretations of quantum mechanics, ranging from Bohmian mechanics to many worlds interpretation to the Copenhagen interpretation to cubism. There's a paper on this, which I'm probably going to put somewhere in post-editing, that talks about this. And most of the people like the Copenhagen interpretation. And the paper surmised that the reason they liked it the most was because they were unfamiliar with the rest of them. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening here. I inferred that the reason people gravitate more towards Penrose is because I think it's some somewhat sociological and neurological reasons why. I think one of the main reasons is he is unorthodox. Unorthodoxy in physics these days have become very tantamount. And I infer that people like him because he's not part of this establishment that people perceive exists. And he's been out there with his ideas. He is a Nobel laureate. When it comes to this book, I'm going to be honest. This is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Now, granted, my wife's book that she gave me, you know, this book on cosmology, it is my favorite book of all time. But this man in this book, my goodness, he really went through everything, almost everything in physics, even the Hawking-Hertog state, even string gas cosmology. So, I mean, he was really thorough in that book, Road to Reality, A Complete Guide to the Laws of the Universe. And I think he's really been out there, and I just, not to sound snide or anything, but I think the more established physicists like it because he's so thorough in how he presents his case. Now, let me kind of get into what he's talking about happened. He's basically saying that in a previous universe, and this is kind of interdependent with option number one, a quantum tunnel and quantum fluctuation generated Big Bang going to another vacuum state and causing bubble nucleation. It's somewhat interdependent. So option number one and option number four are somewhat, you know, playing off of each other. They're not polar opposites of each other. However, he explains that, and let's see if I can remember here, he talks about ADS-CFT correspondence being one of the reasons why he infers that there was another universe before this one. It ended, and the entropy in the end of that universe is very much similar to the level of entropy during the Big Bang. And he cites M.C. Escher's artwork to show this kind of fractal pattern as to how this would work on a geometric level. Remember, this man is a very geometrical man. He came up with the Penrose diagrams that shows us certain things about causality. when it comes to ADS-CFT correspondence, that stands for anti-de Sitter space conformal field theory. So he's talking about the geometry of space-time. And this, I think, so you have anti-de Sitter space, Minkowski space, and de Sitter space. One being kind of open and hyperbolic, one being flat, which is Minkowski space, one being closed. I forget which is which, but he's talking about it based on anti-de Sitter space. And conformal field theory kind of, that gets into more of his MC Escher analogy. So he, you know, he's really been out there explaining his case. And my inference is that the professionals like him, or the people who are getting a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in physics, they like this because he's been very comprehensive in his approach to these things. Now, let's kind of get into the one that got the least amount of votes. String theory. I have a book here talking about string theory. So really, this is actually one of the first physics books I got. It's all torn up. It's from Brian Greene. It's The Fabric of the Cosmos. I've had that book since 2011. I've had that book for 10 years. It's one of the first physics books that I read from cover to cover. There's a lot of stuff in it. He kind of makes a lot of Simpsons analogies, and he talks a lot about all these different vacua strings, 10 to the 500 strings. String theory has become very unpopular lately. People are not seeing the experimental evidence to confirm such a hypothesis. If I know a lot of people are like, well, what do you personally think? I don't think we have the energies to test string theory. I am neither for or against string theory because I don't think we have the energies to test it. The mathematicians who do string theory are very, very intelligent. Edward Witten, they come up with these really complicated Calabi-Yau manifolds, and it's really complicated stuff. And they did it to come up with a kind of grand unified theory or theory of everything to reconcile quantum mechanics and general relativity. And when you try to, you know, mix these two types of physics, it yields infinities because, how do I say this? General relativity is based on the space-time fabric and the notion that matter tells space-time how to curve and the curvature of space-time compels matter to move. Whereas quantum mechanics is fuzzier. It's based on the Schrodinger equation, wave functions, and all this weird non-local phenomenon, quantum tunneling, a lot of counterintuitive phenomenon to our everyday life. And string theory was basically stating that the photons, gluons, W and Z bosons, various leptons and quarks, the Higgs field, different vacua, gravity itself, or gravitons, which I'll get into soon here. They're saying that all of these things are compiled of these strings, open and closed strings. And then there's M theory, and then there's 11-dimensional manifolds and things of this sort. But people don't, I don't know what it is. I mean, people don't like string theory. It may be because there are physicists out there who have really railed against it. I have nothing against them. They need to, it has to be vetted. So I'm not here to, say one way or another that string theory is good or bad. I'm under the impression that it hasn't really been tested yet, to be honest. So string theory was the least popular. The other options got their fair amount. Let's see here. Let's see, number 3. Okay, so I think this, okay, let's see, it's statistically different in both subreddits here. So let's focus on number 1. Option number 6 got a pretty substantial amount in the r/theoretical physics subreddit. And that's talking about pre-Big Bang entities causing the Big Bang. Here's my thoughts on that. The only reason I have to be careful with this one, because you're basically saying God created the universe, and that's not what I'm saying here. The only reason I've explored this hypothesis is because of a paper from Alan Guth et al. On the universe being made in a laboratory. So it's easy to infer that perhaps some other entity did this. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack. The video viewership is probably going to plummet right after I say this. But, just stay along for some other analysis, But I really think that a lot of people gravitate towards this simply because they want a pre-Big Bang entity to intervene in their life. So we have to be adults. Well, I don't know adults. I mean, even if people are still adult and believe this stuff, but we have to be mature and explore this hypothesis with experiments and quantifiable observations. If it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. If it's indeterminate, it's indeterminate. But I'm trying to be objective here and explore this hypothesis. But this one is controversial because a lot of people want a pre-Big Bang entity to take care of them. So when, I'm very weary of how people analyze. I don't know if we're mature enough to analyze this hypothesis at this state because of people's pain and suffering and desperation. They really do want this entity to intervene somehow. And that option is pretty controversial because you're getting into the purpose of the universe and things of this sort. And I know a lot of people will disagree with what I'm saying here, but I'm not going to do a neurological analysis on reward and religion and how people who study physics are actually thinking about things in a more comprehensive way, more so than just thinking about reward. But that option needs to be analyzed with maturity. We have to remove the stigma of transcendence and try to find out if that's what happened. Now, with some other options with loop quantum gravity, that was another one that wasn't very popular. And I think that that's because a lot of people don't know what that is. I always get asked, can you explain to me what loop quantum gravity is? And I'm going to put up, I'm going to probably in post put up little pictures that kind of explain what each of these things are. And it's complicated for me. I don't have any books on loop quantum gravity, by the way. This is the only thing that I don't really have any books on. I'm sure Penrose probably gets into it in his book, but I don't have any books on the subject by itself. So with loop quantum gravity, it's really getting into this notion that there were spin foams. Let me go back a little bit. There were spin foams. And there's this kind of pre-Big Bang branch dealing with black hole remnants. I have a video from years ago in which I got into the differences between string theory and loop quantum gravity, which I might kind of link here. And that video would get into that a little bit more. I made that video about almost 10 years ago. That's one of my first YouTube videos. So I'll let you see that there. And as for the Hartle-Hawking-Hartog no boundary proposal, I also think that that's interesting as well. It's also somewhat geometrical, and Roger Penrose gets into it in his book. It's a high contender. So a lot of people are going to ask, so what do you think, Mr. Von Bradford? I voted for option number 1. From the evidence that I'm seeing based on the cosmic microwave background and the anisotropies and inhomogeneities in it, and all of the different analysis of the cosmic microwave background and the Casimir-Polder force and some other apparatuses, I highly infer that there was a quantum tunnel and quantum fluctuation generated Big Bang that occurred. And these fluctuations went from one metastable vacuum state to another and cause bubble nucleation. And this is from Alan Guth, Alexander Vilenkin, and Andrei Linde. This is not totally contradictory with Penrose's option or with the very last one in the theoretical physics subreddit dealing with a pre-Big Bang entity, which once again we must analyze with caution. Some people will ask, well, why didn't you choose string gas cosmology or the Hartle-Hawking Hertog state, or why didn't you choose loop quantum gravity? You want to know my honest reason why? Okay, when it comes to the Hartle-Hawking Hertog no boundary proposal, that would be my second. If I had a hierarchy, that would have been my second one. Here's the honest truth, and I'm not afraid to say this. When it comes to string gas cosmology and loop quantum gravity, and this goes back to that paper I said that was very similar to this poll about people and them voting on different interpretations of quantum mechanics. A lot of them didn't know what the other interpretations really meant outside the Copenhagen interpretation. So I'm just going to admit my own ignorance here. I don't know enough about loop quantum gravity and string theory yet. I'm still studying them. And I won't disparage anyone who does adhere to these. I read a lot of papers on them. I probably have hundreds of papers on these subjects, but I don't know enough about them to state whether I think that these are the things that happen one way or another. What is my least, I guess, what is the option I think is really not in line with interferometers, cryogenics, bolometers, polarimeters, particle accelerators, charge-coupled devices, supercomputers, Monte Carlo algorithms, neural networks, and artificial intelligence? Honestly, the pre-Big Bang entity, because you're kicking the can down the road at that point. If it leads to that, then it leads to the question, what caused that? What you know, you get into an infinite recurrence kind of thing going here. So that one would be the one that I think is the least empirical, or it's really, you know, I'm not sure about that one. I don't, and we have no proof at the moment that we could create a universe in a laboratory. Zaban Hossenfelder and Alan Guth think so. I've made a video on us possibly doing such a thing. So it's not 100, you know, I'm not against it 100 or even 50%, but I have a lot of issues with number 6. One, it kicks the can down the road. You start asking the question, okay, what came before that? 2, I don't think we as a species are mature enough to analyze that hypothesis with any objectivity because of people's pain, pleasure, reward, and punishment. And that's pretty much the one that I don't think really matches up with any data.